Orleans Pelicans since our last podcast. Picking up wins against the Jazz, the Lakers, the Brooklyn Nets, and then this really impressive win over the Minnesota Timberwolves on a back-to-back. Really finding their stride this last week and a half here to end out the 2023 year and the start of this new 2024 year as well. So lot of good things to look at for sure. Yeah, no problem about kind of giving this breakdown over the last four games. I think you've seen a team that has at least tried to do some of the things that we had discussed in previous episodes of playing with more pace, trying to get more defensive stops, and having their defense lead into their offense. Getting up more threes. Um, Granted, Trey Murphy hasn't been in the lineup the last couple, dealing with some knee soreness as well. But I credit most of this success to the big three of the Pelicans, with Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and C.J. McCollum. I think these last three or four games, all of those guys are averaging over 20 points per game, more than 5 assists per game, and slowly, getting used to everybody that's around them and getting a couple more games under their belt with each other. So I think you really see, game to game that each one of those guys can, take on a different matchup or a different look in the offense. And as well, I've really seen a different Brandon Ingram on that defensive end. I think that's been a little bit of the success as well. There was a nice stretch there where probably the whole year he probably had 3 to 5 blocks maybe and a handful of steals. And in this last four, I think he's, picked up probably like 10 blocks, same amount of steals, and putting his body on the line like you saw last night to even take a charge. So I think that those three guys especially have been leading the charge here for our Pelicans. And then you always get different outings from people. You've seen some good bench production from Jose Alvarado. He's really been shooting the ball really well. It seems like he's finally getting his footing under him after that ankle injury. Herb Jones has really been shooting the ball really, really well from outside. And I think there's a stat where, when he hits a certain amount of threes in a game, the Pelicans are 8-0 or 6-0 or something like that. So it's always good when he's aggressive offensively and making shots. So that's kind of what I've seen, and I'd be interested to see or hear what you've kind of seen with this team as well. Yeah, and just to continue to touch on, those three guys, I think if you kind of took back all the data or the stats of these last four games, it seems like pretty much every single night or every single game that these guys have played recently, each guy is probably shooting over 50% from the field, really well from the free throw line. I think Zion's done a better job at the line as of late as well. But you see a guy like Brandon last four games over 50% field goal percentage. His 3 point shot is slowly creeping up to the numbers that we're used to. It's around 35, 36 right now, but coming from the hole that he's been in, I think he's slowly starting to find a rhythm in the behind the arc there. And then of course his free throws are starting to drop, like normal, like we said. But I think it's been very crucial that C.J. McCollum has looked so good these past few games, and he didn't start off too hot last night, but you saw he was the guy that took it upon himself in that second half to hey, it's going to be my turn. Hit a couple threes early after a short little run that Minnesota had, and basically said, hey, we're not losing this one tonight. I'm going to put us on our backs for a little bit, and then Zion kind of close it out from there. But I think you're just really seeing a wholesome, pairing between the three of them, and they're doing it efficiently. They're doing it the right way. So I couldn't be happier with the performances from those three guys. And it is kind of seeing, oh, well, this point of the game, this person might be on or this person might be on. And, it's really, field the other guys. And, especially with us trying to make more threes, it's good to see CJ shooting at such a high clip. I think his last 16 games, he's shooting about 50% from three. Brandon's uptick is always good, and Herb's been shooting it really well. So when you get those guys, hitting a bunch of shots from the starters, and then you bring in those bench guys who can also hit some shots. It's been definitely working out for the Pels in their favor so far. Yeah, I think you kind of have seen that, when those guys, I think they're finally comfortable in a rotation where these guys know exactly when they're going to go in now that everybody's healthy. They know the exact minutes, per se. And like I said, I think that, Larry and Jose have definitely, gotten healthy here over this last stretch. And it kind of seems like they're back to their old ways. So that's always good when you can bring in a spark plug like Jose Alvarado, who's going to be a menace on that defensive end, but also like I touched on, he has been hitting his threes at a higher clip as well. Larry's kind of been all over the place, being that linebacker or middle linebacker for the team, calling out everything, uh, playing with great energy, and just being that anchor for that second unit in there. You saw him kind of make the play of the game. Granted the score was kind of out of hand, but someone was trying to drive it in on him yesterday and kind of met him at the rim. And those are the plays that you need later on in the season or in playoffs, and not letting those easy baskets go. So the production that you've seen from those guys since Larry's return and Jose been getting more healthy has been crucial. I'll also touch on Najee Marshall. He comes in and he's kind of like that junkyard dog who's going to be going in there and playing his heart out and playing with pace, and he's got a bunch of different moves in his bag as well. And then, Dyson Daniels, he's kind of been that guy with his new role now where he comes in at the second quarter and plays majority of that second quarter and just kind of is that, next defender guard and the best player on the team. So, I mean, you're seeing these guys hit shots. I think they're more comfortable in the roles that they're in right now, specifically. And it's been a really great thing when, you got nine guys, pretty much 10 guys that you can look towards to in these games. Depending on who you're matching up with, and you feel pretty comfortable with them. Yeah, I think like you touched on, it's good to look back and since that in season tournament, they're 9-3, 4-0 in the last uh, four here after dropping a few ones that they should have probably had, but definitely from my perspective, probably the biggest chunk of the season if you take the next 5 or 6 games, all teams that are playoff should be playoff bound or have championship pedigree. Um, I mean, tomorrow's game against the Clippers, that's going to start you out. Then after that, you got the Kings, Warriors, Nuggets, and then 2 games at the Mavs. So you're pretty much, like you said, seeing everybody from that Western Conference. Uh, I truly believe, and I think we've touched on this a few times, that I think it's always better when this team plays teams that are made up of this who are a little better, which are going to challenge them more because I think they do truly, get up for those games, to their best abilities. So I think, just kind of touching in on everything on how they need to kind of approach these games is I wouldn't be changing anything that's going right for them right now. I think you stick to the plan of your defense has got to bleed into your offense, and you got to get out and transition, especially some of these other teams who are somewhat a little older and have older constructed rosters. If you can get the defensive stops and lead to transition and uh, you know hit your threes and play with pace, like we always say, I think it's always a good outcome for the Pelicans. Like we said, it is going to be a tough stretch here, and you kind of got a bunch of different teams who are in that playoff picture, but I like where the Pelicans are at right now, but it is definitely going to be crucial these next 5 or 6 to continue to play as a team and play in this certain style, like we've said. And you hope your main guys are the ones coming through for you, but you also do need that those role players to step up in some of these games as well to hopefully propel you in these wins that you hope to get. I mean, it's tough to say, Pat. I think we're all riding a little bit of a high on this 4-0 streak here, and I've always said I like my roster put up against any of these rosters. So, I'm always going to believe and aim high and say, you know, I would love to say that this team goes. 4-2, but all reality, you hope you get a split here. There is certain times where you have a back to back, so those are usually pretty tough, especially all of these being on the road besides tomorrow's game against the Clippers. So you got to put that into a factor as well. Um, I don't know. I think we historically play good against the Clippers and the Nuggets, and the Mavericks is always a toss up. And then, this year we've had the Kings number. So all tough games, like we've said. I like a 4-2 stretch out of this team. I think they're really on a roll, um, especially if they keep playing the way that they're playing. I think they're kind of in that groove, and like I said, I like when they play the tougher teams. It seems like all of these guys kind of have a little bit more of an edge. We do have one national TV game in there against the Warriors, so I like that, and it being a kind of a bigger stage matchup there. But that's kind of how I see it shaking out. Obviously, when you have these tough teams, it could go in the opposite direction where you go 2-4 or something like that. But I think this team's rolling right now, and like I said, I'll take my guys against those guys' roster any day. I just think this team's on too good of a roll right now. I think these games are all set up for Brandon Ingram to be that guy. Um, like I said, tougher stretch of games. These might have a little bit of a bigger feel to them. Brandon always seems to get up for those types of matchups, and it's not just necessarily like scoring. Like he can impact the game in many different ways, and I think he's on a good groove where he's in a good rhythm. Shooting wise, he's starting to get north of 5, 6, 7 assists every night again, kind of getting in that rhythm like he was in last year towards the end of the year. And then also like with his defense, I think he's really taken on that challenge this year to, if we're going to be a really good team, I've got to take some matchups in some of these games. So it wouldn't surprise me if, say, tomorrow he takes a Kawhi Leonard or a Paul George out there and matches up with them. Same thing with, the Nuggets or the Mavericks. Like he's going to want somebody, you know, put his imprint on that end of the floor as well. And I think that's been like the biggest difference with this team too. Is he's stepped it up uh, on that level and on that side. So I think it's crucial for him to come into these games aggressive, but also at the same time he's going to have a lot of gravity and a lot of eyes on him. So when he's willing to make those passes and get guys open shots, I think that's only going to lead to success for the Pelicans in this stretch. Yeah, and like I said, it's one of those things where I think this team's finally gelling, where they're getting some games together, and like you said, Zion might be coming into his own here, conditioning wise, and I think it's really paying dividends that it truly is a team effort. And when I look at a certain team's roster compared to ours, like this is why you built this team like you built it. I mean, there's just so much just firepower out there with, the athleticism component, with the length, with, shooting across the board. And so now that I think we finally, reached a point where we've gotten some good rhythm here, um, I like our guys compared to anybody in this stretch of games. And so one night it could be a Brandon who goes off for, a nice stretch, or a Zion, or even CJ, but it's going to be a collective effort for sure. We got to continue to make our shots, and you know, I'm sure there's going to be a couple tough games. So making our free throws down the stretch will be a big key too. But I think on a night in, night out basis, you're going to see a little bit from everybody across the board, 1 through 9 or 10, and hopefully, some of those things will help us stack up some wins here.